Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We're also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
On this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are covering league news to date. We are recapping the fallout from the Senior Bowl. We are recapping the 2024 season, going over our predictions to see who was right and who wasn't. We are going to release our first 2025 first round projected redraft rankings for you guys. But first, we have a recap of the Super Bowl. Jeff, the AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs, two-time Super Bowl champions, lost their attempt at a three-peat against the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles, 40-2. Jeff, what went wrong for the Chiefs? What went right for Philadelphia? How did this game go?
Well, I believe our friend Taylor Swift has a song called 22, so very apropos that the Chiefs would only score 22 points, which also, speaking of Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce's career is kind of in jeopardy right now. Like, he is taking some time to think about this. He's a guy that does not need to play another down to be a Hall of Famer in this league, but I could see the way that the season ended, leaving a sour taste in his mouth, but I do know that he has aspirations and career goals, just like Jason Kelce did after last year, after he's done playing. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch and monitor. I think DeAndre Hopkins will be another interesting piece to watch here. Like, does he call it a career now that he's played in a Super Bowl? Or does he continue playing as an ancillary piece because he's not the alpha that he once was, and we all know how hard it is for an alpha to be a beta later in their career. Like, it's not usually possible, so we'll see what happens there. I think he was just a good soldier for this year, but this game wasn't remotely close. Mahomes and the offense didn't get going until the third quarter, and the game was well out of reach at that point. I think the Eagles already had 24 points at that point, so they already had them beat at that juncture of the game. Barkley was the very surprising thing for me, that he did not do as much in this game as I thought he would. I thought he would be the MVP. You thought the referee would be the MVP and the Chiefs would win. So I'll take the last victory of the year because I picked the Eagles and Barkley, but it was the Eagles and Hurts. And he was the MVP with 2 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown. And I think what really needs to be said in this right here is Nick Sirianni's job is safe for the foreseeable future. I don't think you can fire a Super Bowl winning coach that quickly, but we do know that he brings turmoil to the team, and we would prefer a head coach to bring peace to a team. So, Alex, the Bengals missed the playoffs, the 49ers missed the playoffs, the Eagles missed the playoffs after they went to the Super Bowl and lost. Do you believe that the Chiefs could potentially miss the playoffs in 2025?
I mean, everything's the potential to happen. The Chiefs played horrendously in this game. The offensive line needs a lot of work. There's a good chance that they don't make it back. Travis Kelce could retire, like you indicated. Hopkins could retire. They should be getting Rashee Rice back. Granted, he's going to miss a few games. Worthy was making another. Their defense needs to be retooled. They're lucky to keep their defensive coordinator. He didn't get a head coaching job this cycle. So they should be competitive. If they make significant improvements on the offensive line, they could be right back. But they also won't have the pressure of a three-peat hanging over their shoulders either. So it's really up in the air.
Yeah, and when we do our first predictions for 2025, it'll be interesting to see, because I do believe the Raiders will be better with Pete Carroll. I think the Broncos will be better with Sean Payton and Bo Nix in year 2. I think the Chargers and Justin Herbert will be better in year 2 with Harbaugh. The coaching in that one division may be the best coaching in the division ever. So I think you have 3 Super Bowl winning coaches and you have 1 Super Bowl loser in that division. And man, that is death row right now. So we'll see what happens. But Alex, this game here put the 2024 season in the rear view mirror. Like, there is no football now until the Hall of Fame game at the beginning of August. So we are 6 months without any football. One of those sickos that watches the Hall of Fame game because it's like the hey, we're back moment. Don't watch it to watch any players, but just I like being back. So from now until then, we will get you prepared for the fantasy football season. Alex, anything else you want to say on the 2024 playing season? I know we'll recap the year a little bit later.
I am just excited to see which playoff teams carry over to next year and which teams missed this year that will make it next year. So that'll be fun to try to predict. But we can go into coaching news and potential trading news.
Yeah. So your buddy, Chip Kelly, has finally made it back to the NFL, and he makes it as the Raiders' new offensive coordinator. Typically, we don't talk about offensive coordinators, but we did talk very early on in the Raiders search. If they did pick Pete Carroll, it seems like they would need to make sure that they had a succession plan. Now, the question is Chip Kelly a succession plan to Pete Carroll? Or is Chip Kelly really just there to be the offensive coordinator? I hope that he gets another shot. His offenses have always been very fun. And if you remember the Eagles, they were going 70, 75 plays a game. Love that pace. So do you believe that Chip Kelly will be the succession plan to Pete Carroll, or do you think that he's just there to be the offensive coordinator?
I think he could be a succession plan. I think he wanted to move closer out to the West Coast because he likes the West Coast area. As you can remember, he was the Oregon head coach for a while. I think that's where he wanted to be. And I think he wants a chance to prove that he can be an NFL head coach.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll see what the Raiders can do for their offense. It seems like they will be going in a different direction for quarterback in 2025. So we will see what happens there. Alex, did you want to go over the Texans news? I know that you want to continue the offensive coordinator trend here, so go ahead.
I have just adding stuff as I'm reminded. Texans hired a new offensive coordinator. They hired a rising star in the Rams offensive coach, Nick Caley. Nick Caley's previously coached the tight end position, and I believe he's been had some coordinator duties with the Rams a little bit. He hasn't called plays before, so that's going to be new. But he's from the Sean McVay tree. He's potentially bringing over a good offensive line coach with him. So I think this is a great hire for the Texans. It's as good as you can get. I know a lot of Texans fans wanted Chip Kelly, so that made me want to talk about it. So I think he's a good coach candidate, and we'll see if he can be better than Bobby Slowick. But speaking of Bobby Slowick, he has found the job with the Miami Dolphins as their new senior pass game coordinator. So we'll see if he can rehab with one of your favorite coaches in McDaniels over there.
Yeah. I don't know if he can. I think he burned his one and only shot because he was such a hot shot for a minute there. But we will see what happens there. But we have several teams looking to move in different directions from players. The Rams are planning to move on from star wide receiver Cooper Kupp. They informed that they will trade him if they can soon, but I think he's owed somewhere around $20 million for 2025. A team's not going to pay him $20 million. They'll probably pay him closer to 10. So will the Rams pay $10 million just to get $15 million in cap space versus just cutting him and getting $10 million in cap space? I think it's a $5 million difference between the cap. So they may very well cut him and move on from him. Alex, I know we were talking offline a little bit today earlier, but I expect Cooper Kupp to remain right there in LA. He loves LA, and I expect him to just continue to play in that same building just for the Chargers. So just move his locker.
I think that is a certain possibility. I also think the other landing spot is my local team here, the Houston Texans, who just hired one of his coaches. I think he would
Yeah.
be a nice compliment to Nico. He'd be the underneath guy, then fill the Stephon Diggs role.
Come on, you guys are going to bring Diggs back, right?
No, I don't think so.
It was going well while he was healthy. That was his first major injury of his career, too. So that's an interesting player to talk about. We do know that he'll land somewhere for next year because can't see him wanting to end his career on a torn ACL. So that's just my thought on that matter. Nothing concrete there. San Francisco is planning to move on from Deebo Samuel. Don't know what that looks like, but it sounds like they're going to roll with Ayuk, Pearsall, and Jennings as their 3 receiver sets. And obviously George Kittle will be out there still. And it sounds like they want to move on from Deebo Samuel before giving Brock Purdy his extension, which also we talked about earlier today. Find it very interesting and intriguing that the 49ers say over and over and over again that they are excited to extend Brock Purdy. Well, here we are 2 days into the extension possibility, and they have not extended him yet. So their excitement is questionable at best right now.
Well, there's no rush. Brock Purdy wants to be there. They also have the option to franchise tag him. So there's no need to be hasty about the process at all. They have all the control in the situation, and he's not the type of person to cause a ruckus, so to speak, about his contract situation. I think with clearing out Debo and his contract, I think that they're going to focus on offensive line and defense and maybe upgrading their backup running back situation. So if Christian McCaffrey misses significant time again, they have a really good running back to fill in. So that's what I expect them to target in the draft. And I expect them to roll with the 3 wide receivers you named as their starting lineup.
So you think they'll get another back outside of Garendo and Mason and McCaffrey?
Yes.
Because Mason proved that he could handle that role.
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah, and Garendo looked really good in stretches as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they draft somebody or bring someone off the street.
I think they probably draft someone, and I think Shanahan likes to have 4 running backs on his roster.
Don't forget they got Kyle Juszczyk still, so
He's
that
a
special weapon.
fullback, tight end, hybrid.
I think they classify him as special weapon, actually. I think Taysom Hill is very similar to that as well, special weapon, just except for he throws the ball.
All right. Well, the Jets are planning on moving on from both Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Jeff, what do you make of this news? Is it reasonable for them to do that, given how much money they've been paying them and traded assets they've traded to get those guys? And what does that do to their roster?
So is it smart? No, but I do understand what Aaron Glenn is trying to do here. He's trying to build a culture. In order to do that, you have to get rid of a few players that aren't the best at culture building. So that's just one of my thoughts on that. I don't know what direction that the Jets will go in at the quarterback position. Also, I guess we should address this also. Garrett Wilson has been notoriously frustrated with being a Jet. Do you think that comes to a head this year, or he gives Aaron Glenn a shot at being his head coach first before moving on?
It depends on what the organization thinks of Garrett Wilson, because there's a lot of people that think that he's underperformed from the position he's been in, which I mean, I can kind of see the different sides of it. I think they'd be foolish to trade him. I think it's different from the Rodgers and Devontae Adams situation because I think it was foolish to trade for Rodgers and Devontae Adams. I think Rodgers is at the end of his career. Adams is not the same player that he was even a year or two ago. And I don't want those guys on my roster. And if I want to build a winning culture at this stage in their career, Wilson is young. I still like his upside a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's put a pin in Rodgers and Adams right now, and we'll add them to our next podcast, which will talk about where we believe people will end up and where their best landing spot will be. So leave a little bit of a breadcrumb there. And also a current star. So Myles Garrett is requesting a trade from the Browns, and they don't have to oblige, but this is formal now. This is getting a little bit more messy and more public. So there will be some pressure to move Myles Garrett for a king's ransom. And I could see teams looking to acquire this player. I could look to see teams acquiring Micah Parson as well. And so that could be two rushers that are potentially moved this offseason for a King's ransom. And there could be teams like the Buffalo Bills, pick late, could package a few picks together and bolster their defensive line and be much more competitive against a team like Kansas City, which, look what Philly just did to Kansas City. That pass rush destroyed Patrick Mahomes and brought home a Super Bowl title. So Buffalo's going to have to start looking towards defense. I've heard of the Packers out there for looking for pass rush as well. But there's a couple pass rushers on the block right now. But the only one that's requested an official trade request is Myles Garrett here for the Browns. Sounds like he is not a Watson fan.
This is a very interesting offseason for pass rushers because this draft class is loaded with pass rushers, like absolutely loaded with pass rushers. So that may depress the market because there's people out there that will think I can get a pass rusher on a cheap rookie deal and then maybe have a 5th-year option and then 2 franchise tags after that. Why would I pay someone who I think is 29, approaching 30, is going to start going on the tail end of their career and give up multiple picks to get him? So that's one conversation teams have to discuss. On top of that, the Browns cap situation is so terrible with Watson's contract and how poorly they've managed that roster that it is very close to impossible to trade Myles Garrett with the cap hit that they'll get. So they're gonna have to navigate that aspect as well. I don't know if they'll get enough from a team to make it worthwhile. I know people out there speculating they'll get 2 first-round picks. I don't think that that's likely. They'll be lucky to get 1 first-round pick plus. I think it'll be more like conditional seconds and fourths added together to get him, which the Bills would be a good landing spot because the Bills have 2 second-round picks as well as their first. The Detroit Lions are a team I think could get in on him as well. So it'll be very interesting to see if all of these things line up and he gets moved. But on top of him, I agree Parsons is most likely to get moved. He's going to be tagged probably and traded because the Cowboys can't pay him. And Max Crosby has been talked about being potentially moved as well. So this is a very, very interesting offseason for pass rushers.
Absolutely. And the last bit of league news is no surprise at all. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but the Saints officially hire Kellen Moore as their head coach. Now, all the head coaching jobs are filled. And Kellen Moore looked pretty good with the Eagles this year, but he's not going to have the same talent with the Saints as he does with the Eagles. So we're going to see how good of a head coach he is this upcoming year.
I don't think I've seen anything about the contract details yet. Have you seen numbers or anything yet?
Coaches are hit or miss for contract numbers and years. It's usually between 4 and 5 years for their first contract. but Ben
Have you
Johnson's was
noticed?
leaked.
Have you noticed that not only did the Eagles humiliate the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but they humiliated their division rivals as well? So you have Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator won a Super Bowl. You have Saquon Barkley won a Super Bowl, and you have Jahan Dotson won a Super Bowl.
Thought
All
you were going to say they
I
beat
know
him in the
that
championship
last
game. I
I
would
know
have.
well that too. They beat him. They beat him in the
I would
playoffs.
rather that than John Dotson. They
Well, I
blew
was
him
talking
out.
about additions to the team, but yes, they blew him
Yeah.
out. That's way more impressive than the actual Jahan Dotson thing. But anyway,
No
so
offense,
like
John.
to be the Cowboys and know that you could have hired Kellen Moore as a head coach, and he at least won a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator and called plays. I'm not sure about Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach. And then the Giants just keep getting embarrassed. All of their former players go somewhere else other than Tony and look really good. Like Barkley looked incredible. Their safety McKinstry looked great. Like everyone that leaves that team seems to do better. So I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if the GM is the worst GM in football. It's pretty close between the Giants and the Browns, I think.
Absolutely. And we will see what is going to happen moving forward. But Kellen Moore has his work cut out for him with cap situation, with talent situation. Like, is he going to keep Derek Carr? Does he like Derek Carr? So,
Apparently, the word on the street is the Saints were vetting every coach that they interviewed to make sure that that coach likes Spencer Rattler. Uh,
interesting. So, that
I,
could be another quarterback out there.
So Derek Carr could be on the move this offseason. I think they might roll with Spencer Rattler for this next season. If it works out, they'll make him the permanent starter going forward. If it doesn't work out and they stink, they're going to draft Arch Manning should he hit the draft in 2026.
We know tanking doesn't always work. What if Rattler improves, and so they may
But
not get the
they're
number one
hedging their
pick?
bets. So if Rattler takes off, that's their guy. If Rattler doesn't take off, they're probably going to lose games, in which case they'll be in a decent position to get Arch Manning or trade up.
What if he's just good enough to have them at pick like 10, 11, or 12?
That's the risk they're going to have to take.
Yeah. But Kellen Moore can't risk going 2 and 15 in his first season, because that makes a seat very hot on the very first season, even if it's the
So,
mission. But
but
because the fan
there
base won't put
were
up with that.
there were a lot of draft nicks that liked Spencer Rattler as a prospect, and I even toyed around with ranking him over Caleb Williams too. So
What? I've seen them both play this year, and it's night and day difference so far.
I don't think so. If you consider all the assets that Caleb Williams has gotten to play with already and what Spencer Rattler had by the time he took over, that's night and day difference. So
Alvin
I think
Kamara.
I'm not sure how much he played with Alvin Kamara.
He had to
He
have
didn't
wide
he didn't
receiver
get
throw
the
touchdowns to him, and that's what hurt Calvin Kamara, if you remember correctly.
he didn't get to play with Olave from what I remember at all.
No. Olave might be a lost cause in the league, though, right at this point.
I don't think he's a lost cause. I don't think he's what fantasy fans thought he would be. Like fantasy players thought he'd be. He's not a number one. He is never going to get a high number of touchdowns. He might get a decent amount of catches, but he's like a 1,000-yard receiver, 4 touchdowns a year, maybe 5 or 6 max, and that's about it. Like he's a number two, number three wide receiver and pretty solid like that.
Absolutely. All right, Alex. It's your turn to shine here with the Senior Bowl recap. Are there any number ones that isn't named Chris Olave that we were just talking about? Are there any number ones out there that could potentially surprise us and be a fantasy savior?
Well, I think the cream of the crop in this draft are the underclassmen that declared, but I'll try to highlight some guys in the Senior Bowl that stood out from the fantasy football positions here. I'll just mention that The Senior Bowl, most of the guys people are excited about are either offensive linemen or defensive linemen for the most part. But some fantasy players, potential fantasy players that won out of this, that are winners coming out of the Senior Bowl, both practice and the game, is number one, TCU wide receiver Jack Beck. He got the MVP for the game. He got the game-winning touchdown at the end. He had 6 catches for 68 yards. That was the best performance, I think, of any wide receiver in the game. Granted, these guys really get like 2 drives, really, and rotate with somebody else. He was phenomenal, and he's someone that his skill set kind of reminds me a little bit of Puka Nacua, where he's a bigger physical guy. He's not as big as Puka, but he looks pretty jacked. He blocks, he catches, he does all the tough routes. So he's someone that will also benefit from Puka Nakua's success. So he's not going to go in like the 5th or 6th round. He's probably going to go day 2, either in the 2nd or 3rd round, most likely. So there'll be higher expectations for him than there were for Puka. Another guy that did well was Iowa State receiver Jaden Higgins, and then I think that Arkansas wide receiver Isaac Tesla also did pretty good with 2 official catches for 35 yards and a 2-point conversion on a catch in the 4th quarter. We had a couple tight ends that did well with Miami tight end Elijah Arojo. He's someone that's probably going to go day 2 in the NFL draft and might be highly coveted depending on what team he goes to. And Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr., who has better college game tape than he had a Senior Bowl practice. He did very good in the Senior Bowl and was a focal point on the offense. So he's another tight end that could be very interesting. And then we're trying to figure out who the 3rd quarterback is going to be in the NFL draft behind Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. And I think Mississippi quarterback Jackson Dart has kind of showed up. He did pretty solid in Senior Bowl practice, and he looked like the best playmaker in the Senior Bowl game. He had a 2-point conversion. He ran in for a rushing touchdown. He showed improvement in the game. On a 4th and 2, he missed seeing an open wide receiver and ended up throwing the ball away. And on the 2-point conversion, it was a similar setup, and he improved himself and found the open wide receiver and got it. So that is pretty impressive to coaches and scouts that he learns within the same game and improves. So I think that, and he's surprisingly athletic for what he is. I think he could be someone who is the 3rd quarterback taken. But in addition to that, we had guys that ended up with better stats than he did. So Memphis quarterback Seth Hennigan, who was a virtual unknown before this game, had one of the best days under center, and he had 12 for 14, 132 yards, and he had the game-winning touchdown to Jack Beck. Notre Dame's the runner-up to the national championship quarterback Riley Leonard had a strong outing too, going 6 for 7 for 54 yards. He's not someone I'm super high on in the draft process, but he is someone that could go high day 3 to a team that wants a project quarterback to take over. Now we move on to the losers here. There's only one real loser you can single out, and then there's a position group that you can point out as a whole. So the individual biggest loser is Alabama's quarterback, Jalen Milroe. He looked bad in practice, and he had a very shaky outing in the Senior Bowl, finishing 3 for 5 for just 21 yards. He took 3 sacks. He also had a couple rushes, and he almost had an interception in this game. He's just not been good. He's not shown any improvement. I think he, at this point, looks like a poor man's Justin Fields, probably worse than Anthony Richardson has been in the pros so far. He's a big time project. And I think he's sliding down draft boards and is probably a 3rd or 4th round pick at this point. Outside of that, the whole position group of the running backs that were in this game, none of them really distinguished themselves or showed up. I know Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State University's running back, threw for a touchdown in this game, but it was a very wobbly, shaky ball that was very lucky to get caught, and it's more a failing of the defensive back. But other than that, no one really stood out, even though there's some good prospects that played. All right. That was a mouthful. But Jeff, anything that you took away from this?
So, a couple things. Jack Beck, he has a great story as well, which played just before the Super Bowl. So, there's going to be a lot of people that are very interested in him. He won the MVP. During that tragedy in New Orleans on New Year's, he lost his brother. So, and now the Super Bowl was in New Orleans. He was there for the coin toss. There's going to be a lot of scouts, a lot of fans that know his name before he gets into the NFL now. And that's pretty rare that actually happens like that. Also, when we were talking about quarterbacks earlier today, I could have thrown this out there then, but I think there is a dark horse quarterback because I did ask you that earlier today. And I think that Kyle McCord from Syracuse is going to be a dark horse quarterback in this draft. So we'll see, but I believe that he has the skills to make it in the NFL.
He is someone I thought about when you asked me that question. I need to watch more film on him, but he is a name I hear that's rising. And I think he's probably better than Riley Leonard or Ohio State's quarterback,
He's 1
Howard, I
hour
think. I
down the
can't remember
road
his name.
that way.
Yeah, so he is someone I hear is rising too.
Yeah, so I mean, I always root for great quarterback play in this league because that's what makes it fun. So just we need at least one or two to come out of this draft and be good to great. So that's all we can ask for at this point because last year we got 5 or 6 good to great. So and there's still ones that we haven't seen play yet from last year.
That's true.
Jordan
All right,
Travis.
Jeff, let's move on here to our 2024 season recap, starting with our standing projections. I'll let you take this away.
Yeah, I mean, you just spoke a lot. I'll keep this as concise as possible. But in May, Alex had 5 exactly correct in our standings projections. Jeff had 4. I'll speak in the third person for this, apparently. In September, Alex still had 5 correct. They weren't the same 5, and Jeff had 4, not the same 4. The most stunning stat is in May, Alex had 15 teams within 1 win of where they were, and that decreased to 12 in September. In the same time period, Jeff went from 11 to 10. So that means our best projections, our safest projections, came in May, which is crazy. So earlier projections. In the final projections, Alex got Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Houston, Giants, Rams exactly right, while Jeff got Tennessee, the Chargers, Arizona, and Seattle exactly right. Jeff and Alex were combined to be the most wrong on the Minnesota Vikings. Alex had 7 wins for them. Jeff had 3 going into the season, but they ended up with 14. So, I mean, that's huge. He doubled yours and more than quadrupled mine. So that was both of our worst projection individually as well. Other than Minnesota, I whiffed on the Jets, Jacksonville, Denver, and Detroit missing by 5 or more wins. So that could be 5 or more in either direction. And lastly, for this part, Alex missed by 5 or more wins the Jets, Jacksonville, Chargers, Washington, and San Francisco. I know San Francisco was one that we battled about every so often. As far as bets go, Alex won the over-under 11.5 quarterbacks / wide receivers in the first round. He took the over. 13 were selected, so Alex has the 1-0 lead there. Jeff won the Minshew versus O'Connell as the starter for week 1 when Jeff selected Minshew to be the week 1 starter, and he was selected by your boy, Antonio Pierce, to be the starter. And then Alex took the 2-1 lead by the Diggs versus Collins when Nico Collins surpassed the injured Diggs by 35 targets. So Diggs missed half the year and only lost by 35 targets. So that's kind of a little bit eye-opening, but also Nico Collins did miss about 4 weeks as well. And Alex, you selected Nico Collins for that, as I said. Jeff won the Richardson over-under, which I've heard in group chat that Alex is coming around Richardson is no longer a top 10 quarterback unless he can stay healthy. I picked the under 12 and a half games played, and Alex picked the over. He missed 6 games, meaning he played in 11, so the under did nail in that one as well. Alex won the Russell Wilson top 14 and a half quarterback when Russell Wilson missed the first month and finished quarterback 24. Jeff won the fantasy point battle of Higgins versus Pittman by selecting Higgins, and Higgins outscored Pittman by 54.3 points. And I think Higgins missed like 3 or 4 games in that stretch as well. And finally, we were tied 3-3 going into the last bet, and the last bet was Justin Herbert over under 4,200 yards. Alex went the under, Jeff went the over. After suffering a preseason injury, Justin Herbert passed for 3,870 yards, securing the 2024 Cup for Alex. And we're already starting to add bets for 2025. I think we're in discussion on the Joe Mixon, Chase Brown of it all. So stay tuned as we lock those in. Just because they're on the board right now does not mean they will stay there. But as ideas pop up and as we argue about players, we could either argue all day about it or we could put a bet on the board and just be done, put a pin in that argument towards the end of the season, which has really been more entertainment than anything for this. Now, the last part of the 2024 season, this is the last part, and we'll put a bow on it. We won't talk 2024 much anymore. We picked the awards in June of 2024, and the awards were just announced. For MVP, the winner was Josh Allen. Picked Jared Goff, which was a very good candidate. I don't think he made it to the final 5, but he did have a very good year. So I think there was a lot more MVP candidates this year than in years past, but I did pick Josh Allen, and I'll take the victory on that one. Coach of the year, Alex picked Dan Campbell. I picked Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell was the coach of the year, so I'll take 2 for 2 in June. That is pretty crazy.
I think Dan Campbell was the runner-up.
Yep.
If I remember correctly.
He was right up there for sure. Offensive player of the year. We both picked Bijan Robinson. We were both wrong. It was Saquon Barkley. It was right in front of our faces. We should have seen it coming, and not the smartest pick by us, but I may double down on Bijan Robinson next year because they don't love to give they don't love to do back-to-back years on stuff, I've noticed. Like, I'm going to have to move off Josh Allen. I'm going to have to move off Kevin O'Connell as well.
I think the rationale why we didn't do Saquon was we thought he would lose out more touchdowns to Jalen Hurts, and he still got 18 touchdowns. Whereas Bijan was going to play with a better quarterback, allegedly, and his numbers were going to go through the roof. So I think that was the thinking anyway.
Absolutely. And lesson learned there. We also learned lessons on the next one here. Comeback player of the year. You picked Kyle Pitts, who was in the pits again. Like, I think we can almost safely move off of Kyle Pitts for good.
Well, Kirk Cousins didn't help him.
And I picked Aaron Rodgers. We both know how that went. This one, I don't necessarily agree with. It's in the spirit of it, but Joe Burrow is the comeback player of the year. For me, and I know the NFL keeps redefining and resending out what definitions are of this because Flacco beat Damar Hamlin the year before, so they got all upset about that. But for me, a person that resurrected their career is the comeback player of the year, not the person coming back from an injury that had no career jeopardy in reality going on. So if I were voting, it would have been for Sam Darnold in this year because guy resurrected his career, went from almost not having a job to having a job and being the most sought after free agent quarterback this free agent cycle. So kudos to him for rebuilding himself.
I kind of think Joe Burrow is closer to MVP than he is comeback player of the year. He was the best statistical quarterback this year. It's just they didn't make the playoffs, so there's no way he was going to win MVP.
Yeah, because you gotta will your team to the better record than they thought you were going to be. And unfortunately, they underperformed as a team. But I agree. And he probably could have been all pro because that's usually more of a statistical award, anyways. And Lamar won that. I don't remember a year, though, where we've had like a 2,000-yard rusher, a triple crown wide receiver, three quarterbacks that could have been in an MVP conversation. I don't recall a year that had so many worthy candidates. In any other year, you probably could have given any one of those five the crown. So we're in good hands right now with the NFL. And speaking of being in good hands, the rookie of the year, you picked Lad McConkey, who was the best receiver, one of the best receivers. I still like Brian Thomas Jr. and maybe Malik Neighbors a little bit more, but I digress on that. I picked Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels won. So, Alex, unfortunately, you got 0 of the 5 correct. I got 3 of the 5 correct last June. So, we will now refer to Jeff, me, third person, the Oracle, going forward, and Alex is now
Wait,
speechless.
so I think I did better on the projected standings.
Yep.
I won the bets,
Yep.
but because you won the awards, you're the Oracle. I to be fair, I mostly went with the more fun MVP choices. Like I could have just said Lamar Jackson for MVP. Would have been wrong, but it would have been a lot closer to being right. Dan Campbell, if they won a Super Bowl or made it to the Super Bowl, I think he would have been over Kevin O'Connell on this because I know there's some late voting in that regards. Honestly, I think he deserves some credit because with all the injuries that they took, they still were the number one seed in the NFC. So I think that was much closer. We were just both wrong with Bijan, unfortunately. And you're right.
he
Like
he was right
we
up
should
there
have
though.
known it was yeah, but we should have known it was gonna be Saquon, that offensive line for the Eagles. Kyle Pitts was just like I was trying to find someone that fit the injury stuff. I really didn't think about Joe Burrow that much, and I agree with you that I don't think Joe Burrow should really be the comeback player of the year. The rookie of the year one. I think that just like the MVP, I think there's probably four candidates that could have been in the conversation. It's just Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels even did better than what you guessed he would do for rookie of the year. I don't think you expected he'd get that much. But you also got to think about Bowers, the tight end with the Raiders. I think he set rookie records for tight end receiving stats. Ladd McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. Neighbors probably would have been even higher up that list if he was healthy and actually had a functional quarterback throwing him the ball as well. So really, I guess 5 rookies were competing for it. Well, maybe even Bo Nix too, if you want to think about the lack of talent around him.
Yeah, we're in good hands going forward. I think next year is going to be really hard to pick rookie of the year. May go to a running back next year, but it may not be as easy and cut and dry at the running back position.
Yeah, it may not even be the first running back taken in the draft either. It's a very good running back class this year.
Yep. So it'll be interesting, and landing spots will matter a little bit to that for me on that front. All right, Alex, are you ready to switch gears to 2025 and hear our redraft of the first round? Well, our first round for redraft leagues. I guess that's a better way to say it because
That's a much better way. Yeah.
when we were saying it offline, you thought that we were redoing rookies from 2024, but no, we're doing September's, late August's redraft leagues first round here. And Alex, I will let you open it up. Who is your first round selection?
Probably isn't surprising, but I'm going with Saquon Barkley.
That would be me
Philadelphia
too.
Eagles running back. Yep.
Did you know that my picks are already in the system here? I just made them white so you couldn't copy me as we go through this.
Oh, you outsmarted me again, Jeff.
Now
There you go.
I can't make them the right text color. So I'll go first for the second pick here. And with the second pick, I would take Jameer Gibbs.
Wow. So this is someone who constantly harps on how much more valuable wide receivers are in fantasy than running backs. And you got 2 running backs at the top. I'm actually gonna pivot here, and I'm gonna say with potentially Higgins moving on to a new team, I think Jamar Chase is now the most valuable fantasy wide receiver in the league. So I'm going Jamar Chase, number 2, as the number 1 wide receiver.
Right. Who do you got third?
So third is Bijan Robinson for me.
Oh, it's also Bijan Robinson for me. So we
You
have,
are 3 running backs.
yep. So
Wow.
to be fair, I always argue that receivers are more valuable in Dynasty. You do want those bell cows early on in redraft leagues, but I do agree with you that Jamar Chase is the most valuable wide receiver, and that's why I would pick him number 4 overall going into this year. Who do you got, Alex, at 4?
Number 4, I have Malik Neighbors.
What? I didn't see that coming.
I'm expecting a quarterback upgrade and for him to stay healthy and for them to have someone competent opposite of him.
That's a lot of ands.
Yes.
For me, he's the number 7th wide receiver, but I can understand the appeal of him 100%. But he will not be appearing in my top 12. He did make my borderline first rounders, which I will go over at the end. All right, Alex, who you got at number 5?
At number 5, I have Puka Nakua. He's already the focal point, and Cooper Kupp is moving on.
So you think that Stafford will be there next year?
I think they'd be foolish to move on from him this soon.
Yeah. I am going to go at number 5 with C.D. Lamb, who will bounce back from last year and have Dak Prescott for more than half of his campaign as well. So that moves me over to number 6, and I'm going to pick steadfast, quarterback proof Justin Jefferson at 6. And who do you got at 6 there, Alex?
At 6, I have Jahmyr Gibbs here.
Really?
It's hard for me to be as high on him as you are because he just lost his offensive coordinator.
We'll see. It'd be something if both teams crumble. Like Ben Johnson needed Dan Campbell and vice versa. But Alex, who you got at number 7?
At number 7, I have C.D. Lamb.
Okay. I do like that you went Neighbors so high and I went Gibbs so high because I feel like it's standing out on a little bit of a ledge right now. And it's good. My number 7, though, is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I do believe that he puts up good numbers again here. I think when we're talking Cooper Kupp, this could be a potential landing spot for Cooper Kupp as well. Reunite him with Jared Goff in Detroit and opposite Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's one place that isn't being discussed that could happen. My number 8 pick is, I don't know if you even have him in the first round, but it's Derrick Henry.
I have number 8. I have Nico Collins at number 8. As you've noticed, my first round is very wide receiver heavy. I believe we're doing what, half point PPR?
Yeah.
Are we doing? Okay. My top 12 may change closer to actual draft season, or maybe after. I want to see where some of these running backs go because I do really, really like some of these guys, and I may be willing to take a rookie pretty high in redrafts.
All right. No, I completely agree with you on that I wouldn't rule that out, but we saw with Bijan going too high year 1 how that turned out. So just got to temper expectations a little bit. As I always say, expectations are the root of disappointment. So too high of expectations, not being able to hit them, disappointed. Go ahead with your number 9.
Number 9, I have Justin Jefferson.
Whoa, number 9.
I would have him higher if I knew who his quarterback was going to be.
Give me Joshua Dobbs or Nick Mullins. He's done it all. My number 9 is Puka Nakua, which you had a few picks earlier, number 5. So we're all within the same first round here. And my number 10 is Tyreek Hill.
I don't think I have Tyreek Hill in my top 20.
Okay, I'll take him. Broken wrist, playing through it.
Now, if he got traded to like the Chiefs, maybe I'd move him up a little more. All right. My number 10 is your homeboy, Brian Thomas Jr., who just got an upgrade at offensive-minded head coach. Someone who really featured Mike Evans this year. I think he will have even more fun with Brian Thomas Jr.
No, I completely agree with that, but I don't have Brian Thomas Jr. in my top 12 or my honorable mentions right now. I'm really nervous to take him in the first round. Second year receivers, I get really nervous with taking them at their peak from last year.
I agree. I initially thought I was going to have him like at the second, third turn, but I think this coaching hire is good for him unless, Liam Cohen proves he can't be a head coach and everything crumbles down around him. But 11, I have Derrick Henry here.
Oh.
I just think he's an older running back and he has a quarterback that can take some rushes away from him. So I think he's worthy of being in the first round, but he is much closer to second round for me.
Well, at number 11, give me Josh Jacobs, which I know that you aren't a big fan, but he has proven that he is durable. And I don't know, he's even been outspoken that the team needs a legitimate wide receiver one, which I don't mind as a guy that was a bell cow for them this season to speak up with what the team needs. So it's not like he was sitting on the sideline like, oh my gosh, we need another wide receiver. But he's right. They do need a guy that's going to be a dog out there and be the first look on every play.
I honestly just might need a new quarterback.
I like their quarterback.
I think they made a mistake paying him what they did. And he had 1 year and they gave him a huge contract.
Maybe we'll see though. But he's got 4 rookie wide receivers on rookie deals. Sorry, not rookies. And my last pick of the first round is going to be Kyron Williams. And I am a little bit worried about him because Blake Corum is there. And I do believe that Kyrie's fumbles cost them the playoff game this year. So I am a little bit worried about him. So he's the guy that could fall out of there.
Well, you are running back heavy, and I'm very heavily receiver heavy in the first round. I am finishing up with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, St. Brown has to be a first round guy. But my borderline guys, as we were talking about before, so the guy that I would take 13 right now is Jonathan Taylor. 14 was Christian McCaffrey. 15 was Malik Neighbors. 16 is Achan. And 17 is Breece Hall. And then I probably would go Brian Thomas Jr. right around 18.
What about Brock Bowers?
I knew you were going to ask me something silly like that. So Brock Bowers right now is my 31st player on the board. A, I don't know his quarterback. B, I don't know the offensive scheme around using the tight end. I know nothing right now.
He was tight end number 1 with a trashy coaching staff last year and mediocre quarterback play.
Yeah, he's the first tight end off my board, though. I just don't believe tight ends are the most valuable when it comes to this. I have him going right after Jackson Smith-Njigba.
I really like Ashton Genty, and he is someone I might consider borderline first rounder depending on where he goes. Like if he goes to a situation like what Barkley did, I would absolutely rush to draft him.
So I lied to Alex. Right now, Nico Collins is my 18th player. And then Mike Evans is 19 and Brian Thomas would be 20th. So he's in the second round towards the end of it. And that's where I'd feel comfortable taking him.
You just want him to be a deal. That's all.
No, I would be petrified to take him in the first round and knowing that he needs to be an every week scorer for me. And yeah, there was one league I took A.J. Brown last year thinking he'd be an every week scorer for me. Yeah, that did not work out as well as I thought it would this year. Wide receivers sometimes make me nervous in the first round.
I get that.
Because they have to score if you're going to use it there.
Where's Christian McCaffrey on your list?
He was 14th.
14th?
Yep.
He's someone I'd be scared to take in the first round, and I'd even be scared to take him in the second.
Yep, but I think I would take a stab at him as long as he gets through camp and preseason healthy. If there's no injury concerns and he plays a little bit in the preseason, I will be more than happy to slide him up draft boards again.
So, no concerns about CeeDee Lamb and having Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach and having Ken Dorsey as the passing game coordinator? That you saw they hired Ken Dorsey?
Yeah, I don't really love Ken Dorsey, but I do believe in the player. And Lamb did so well in 2024. I just want to point that out as well.
All right. Well, that was our very early 2025 redraft league rankings.
Yes, sir. Never too
And
early,
it's
you know?
never too early. And that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading and listening to this episode. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy and with our handle N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.